hands are tall.
It's ridiculous.
Are they like almost taller than you?
Jackson is quickly approaching. He is
Okay, we got a lot of people out there. We should try to get started.
All right.
Oh, he's got a
Please,
filtered.
and thank you. Could we go ahead and take roll, please?
Oh, sorry. Dan
I
Cater.
got ready to tell.
Dan Cater.
Here.
Lisa Dean.
Here.
Oh, sorry.
You just skipped me. It is. It's just like graduation.
How come you didn't hit her?
Just changing it up a little bit.
I am here.
Kyle Latch, Angie McGinnis here, Teresa Mose here, Vince O'Brien
Here.
Superintendent Collins.
Here. Great. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I do want to just add that at the end of the meeting tonight, we're going to close it just for 5 minutes to discuss a personnel issue.
Friendly amendment, all those in, is it a friendly amendment?
Sure.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. See, I've read Robert's rules at some point. Motion to approve the minutes of the November 19th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes passed. Motion to approve the bills payable. It probably is in the Dropbox now.
It is,
Yep.
but I did it till
Yep.
late.
It's in the paper version in front of anyone? Everyone?
I'll make that motion.
I will second it.
All those in, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Bills paid. And we have a lot of good news tonight.
We do, and I'm not going to make Ann speak, but I'm going to have the camera focus on her right over here. And recognize her as the Chamber of Commerce Educator of the Year, and very well deserved. Does a great job as a fourth grade teacher at McCullough Elementary, and not only as a teacher, but as a leader amongst teachers, and that's recognized by her peers as well. So thank you for everything you do. And as the board knows, she's also been willing, I don't know for how long now, but to come to all of our board work sessions and all of our board meetings, and that's a tremendous commitment as well, and so we appreciate that as well, so thank you. And with that, we are to the employees of the semester, and there's so many out there, I don't know if we just want to bring in all of them at once,
Yeah.
or I think we should.
Yeah, I mean,
Standing room
a
only.
raucous, fun environment. Because one at a time would be just weird.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be. Just.
we're gonna have to ask you to just kind of come
Everybody's
and
coming in,
fill
just
in.
fill on in.
Please.
Please, standing room only. Yeah, anyway, just standing room probably, because we just wanted everybody to come on in.
I guess you can find it.
Come on in. Don't
in.
be shy. Welcome. We could get people to stay for the whole meeting.
Oh, that- Well, if you can do that.
That's on there.
But anyway, on behalf of the community and on behalf of the Hastings School Board, this is always a great time of year for school board members and myself, because all of you have been nominated by your peers, and then it went through a selection process, and the committee gets to hear all the great things that you've been doing, not just for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but everything that you do for our students and our parents, and it's truly, truly appreciated. Tonight also, you're going to get a plaque, and you're going to get a $50 gift card to the Green Mill from NTEC. And NTEC has been a great business supporter of us, and they helped to sponsor the employee of the semester. It's your choice if you want to say anything. That's totally up to you, but I'm going to say something about you. I didn't write this, so some of it I want to claim that I wrote, and some of it I don't want to claim that I wrote, Bob. But Having said that, I'll call you up. You can grab your plaque and your gift card, and you have to stand up here by me while I read all the great things of what people said about you. And then at the end, if you want to stay for the entire board meeting and the truth and taxation portion of it, it's very stimulating.
Could I?
Yeah, I'll videotape it and I'll put it on YouTube for you. So having said that, first person up, Franny Balkan, come on up. And we get to stand here in front because this will be on TV as well. Franny has been a building secretary at McCullough for, well, as long as I can remember. And I mean that in the very best way. She's one of those quiet people who flies under the radar, which is why even though she does an amazing job, it always seems so easy for her. She always knows where to find something, how to do something, or in the rare case that she doesn't know, she isn't afraid to ask the right person for help. She is calm when things get crazy, which is what you need in an elementary office because things can often get crazy. She isn't afraid of hard work, and it is her work ethic that makes her a valuable employee, but it is her heart that makes her a valuable person. Amy Maris.
Yes.
Amy is our middle school psychologist and one of the most respected colleagues in our building. She goes above and beyond what her job requires. A large part of her job is assessing students and completing mountains of paperwork, and yet her door is always open for students, parents, and colleagues. When Amy is approached by staff members who have concerns about specific students, she will drop everything and she will help to brainstorm a solution to support that student. She is a consummate professional in every situation that she encounters. Somehow she manages to do all of the above in a timely manner and with a smile on her face. Thank you so much. Steve Miller.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Rain, snow, sun, or wind, Steve Miller is always on the corner keeping students safe in his role as school traffic control officer. He truly cares about students and works very hard to get them on school grounds in a safe manner. Students and drivers appreciate his smiling face, kind words, and his visibility. Many drivers smile back and respect his directing of vehicles to keep traffic moving and students safe. Our school benefits from Steve. Many times he's the first and last impression for all the people of District 200. He not only does his job well, but he has a great attitude showing he cares about people and wants everyone to be safe. We are fortunate to have him represent our district and the rest of the school traffic controllers as well. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
If I just might say a few things, I want to thank all of you. Education is the greatest profession of all time, and you're all in it. I was for many years in Minneapolis as a teacher and counselor. And I want to thank the drivers of Hastings for not running me over. I appreciate that because I can be kind of a challenge. I know that, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my partner, Monica Chappie at McCullough, because I would be dead now if she wasn't my partner. She's very good at what she does too, and it takes a while to learn how to do it, but she's a wonderful partner, and all of us really enjoy what we do. It's a fun challenge. It can be dangerous, but we all love the kids, and the parents and the drivers are very appreciative, I can tell, and the bus drivers too. And thank all of you again for what you do. Happy holidays to you.
Thank you. George Machulas. George has been teaching in the Hastings School District for over 25 years. This year, his career has come full circle, where he returned to position as EBD teacher for the current school year. But his real passion is teaching woodshop. In addition to his daily role at the Hastings Middle School, he has also headed up the OASIS program for many years now. George knows how important it is for middle school students who are at a very vulnerable age to have a place to go to after school where they can feel safe, accepted, and have some fun. George is a student favorite because of his easy personality, but when you are working around saws and drills, you also have to have safety of students first and foremost. That was never more evident than a few years ago When he tried to help a student, and you just knew this was coming up. I did not write this in here. Somebody else did. When he tried to help a student into his classroom during a lockdown, unknowingly, it was the student who was the cause of the lockdown and had the gun. But that is how George is. He would worry about a student stranded in the hallway and want to help them, because that's what George is all about. Congratulations. Bob Bernardi.
Thank you.
Gonna be right in front of
Oh,
the
yeah, all right.
camera now. People watch this over and
Target on me,
and
is
if
the bullseye?
they have to get to sleep, they're gonna watch this even more often.
No doubt.
Bob Bernardi is one of those people who has a story for every situation. Well, when you work in accounts payable, that is a good thing. Because when you are hunting down people who owe you money, you better have a wealth of experience with stories they will tell you about and when you haven't received their check yet. Bob has a great sense of humor, but more importantly, he is truly committed to the Hastings School District. You may not know this, but Bob bartends on the weekend, and he's always willing to tell the people the good work that is happening in our schools.
We know it.
So you frequent there, huh?
All the time, yeah, we drive him home.
Bob is always explaining to the patrons why a strong school district is important to our kids and to our community. He is always willing to lend a hand when there's a calling to be done for a levy or a bond, and he is an avid supporter of all the school extracurricular athletics and the arts. Thank you for everything you do for our school district.
Thanks. Well, if I can say just a couple of things, I want to thank everybody. I'm puzzled, you know. I didn't think I was doing anything particularly special, and I still don't. I'm grateful to the people in the school district here. You know, a couple of things I have heard, you know, time and again, different ones would say, Bob don't know the meaning of being a clock watcher. Bob don't know the meaning of taking an extra day off, or Bob don't know the meaning of taking a sick day. So I understand the staff got together and they're buying me a dictionary. So, and I think most of you probably know here that I'm going to be retiring at the end of this year, and I'm going to miss it, no doubt. And I guess I've heard that retirement is good if you're busy, rich, and healthy. But I guess under those conditions, working isn't too bad. So, Tim says, I've got a story. So a lot of my sentences start, this reminds me of a story. Now this story might be incorrect and characteristic of me also, because it's kind of a serious one. I heard it some years ago by the Secretary of Education, but this man was walking along the beach one day, and he heard a voice just out of the blue, out of nowhere, say, pick up some pebbles from the beach, and tomorrow you'll be both glad and sorry. Well, he couldn't see where the voice was coming from, but he did as it said, so he picked up a handful of pebbles and took them home. He got home, he put them on his table, and he went to bed. Well, the next morning he got up, and he saw that all these pebbles had turned into valuable jewels, diamonds, rubies, emeralds. And then he remembered that voice, what it said to him. It said that in the morning you'd be both sorry and glad. And he realized it was true. He was glad he had taken some, and he was sorry he hadn't taken more. And so it is with education.
Paul Winker.
A post note, excuse me, on Bob, I'm glad he's watching our money.
Can I add one more thing for our family? Excuse me, I'm sorry, Paula. And this for the benefit of my family, nobody else is going to know that except us. And Kim Fry, my business manager over here. Kim, raise your hand. Kim worked for Dulcie and Bill down at Blue Earth Cream King Drive-In when she was in high school. And all the family, all my family know Dulcie, loved her. Sorry to see her passing.
I worked with them at the drive-in at like 13 years old, and I was scared to death of them because they come out and
I'm sorry. I did, I guess.
No.
I did.
Yeah. Paula has worked in the district as a nurse in several different school settings, including the Tilden Kindergarten Center, early childhood screening at the middle school, and most currently as the nurse at McCullough. In each of these settings, she has been an exemplary nurse. Additionally, Paula has served on the Smart Choices Committee since September of 2010. She has helped to bring about changes in our district to promote students' health and well-being. In all that she does, Paula has a calm, thoughtful, and caring demeanor. She has built strong relationships with students, staff, and parents. The Hastings School District is so fortunate to have Paula working in our school district. Thank you. And again, you're welcome to exit stage right or stay. Your choice. I think we know what it'll be, but thank you.
Do I get to run the camera if I?
No, you don't. But thank you so much, and thank you for family members coming to support them as well. We really appreciate that a lot, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yep, thank you.
Great job, all.
Thank you.
Good work. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
So, what was this about? Driving home?
Right, Jill, have fun.
Thanks,
Bye,
Steve.
Steve. Congratulations. I have a reason, right? See ya.
Dulcie and my mom.
Now you have to go out and second
Lure.
Evidently, we got the gift card out.
All right, there.
Yeah, we might try to
I haven't figured out how I'm related to Gertie. We're gonna map that out.
We'll go on ancestry.com.
Well,
Just go to the
Kim's the rest of the.
oh yeah, so we can't do it.
sit in a booth out there and figure it out.
I was a little worried about Bob, but I knew that seeing this wasn't live, we could splice him out if need be.
It was when I first started.
Yeah.
I was just hoping I wasn't in it.
See ya. Bye, Bob.
Bye, Bob.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Station. No offense to Kim, they really liked her working at the outdoor drive-in theater, but they do not want to listen to her.
Listening to her work here.
And now we go to the superintendent's report.
And we'll start out, Kim's going to walk through the revised budget portion. She's going to walk through the truth and taxation. She'll go through the budget reduction overview, and when she's about in the middle of that, I'll hop in and talk a little bit more about that at that point. So, Kim?
Okay, so I'm just gonna try to hit the highlights on these because it's a lot of data, and then after I'll do the revised budget first, then the truth and taxation, and then if there's questions, we can maybe save those till after that. Okay, so all of you have these packets, right? So where we'll start is on page 2
Which packet, Kim?
of the revised budget.
Okay.
And what this shows is what were the changes between the budget that was adopted in the spring and this current revised budget that we're adopting. And where it starts out with is for the revised budget, there's always a change in what the pupil units were. The adopted budget was based on pupil units that we projected over a year ago. And now, this budget, the pupil units are what we actually had in the buildings on October 1st. So the change in the adjusted pupil units is what we get paid on. We had 19.31 more pupil units than we had projected. And I know Tim has gone through where these changes were, but most of the changes were in the projection of how many kindergarten students we were going to have. And then when we did the adopted budget, legislation wasn't done at that point in time. And after legislation was done, they had given us another $25 on the formula. So between that additional $25 and the increase in pupil units, this budget then, the revenue for the general formula increased by $218,603. And then there's always a tax shift on the reemployment and the career and tech levy portion. We don't know that number until we're doing the current year levy. So that was another change for this budget. It was a positive 23,527. And then our literacy aid, our shared time aid, which was based on the C's students coming for some of those, the math and the science program, I think. And then the non-public transportation aid changed, and those total combined was a negative reduction of 1,113,554. And then our compensatory aid increased by 102. So those kind of netted out against each other. Academic and athletic fees, we kind of watch the budget. As enrollment drops, your fees are going to drop because there's less students paying fees. I don't adjust that every year, but we did adjust it this year to get it closer to what actual is. And then state special ed aid, there was a reduction of 5,000. And then other miscellaneous revenue, all the other revenue in the district combined total was an increase of 22,000. And we do have one other piece of this budget that we still don't have the information for. We have to do a liability study every 2 years, which tells us how much the general fund has to contribute to the retiree health insurance trust, and how much has to be contributed to the committed for the severance payments. We still don't have that information back yet. So if the dollar amount changes, it will just become a variance in this budget. We won't do another revised budget. So the total revenue change for this budget, and this is only the unassigned general fund portion of the budget, is an increase of $232,073. And then on the expenditure side, when we were doing the budget in the spring, we knew that our work comp costs were going down and that the premium would probably go down, but we didn't have the dollar amount at that time. So the prior year cost was what was put in the budget. So when we did get that premium, it actually decreased by $103,651. Transportation, I adjusted based on what 1314's actual ended up being, and it's in the special ed area. And even doing an adjustment doesn't mean that it's going to be correct at the end of the year, because it's based on the student needs, and it goes up and down every year based on that. Operation and maintenance utility budgets were adjusted for and basically it was the electricity and the natural gas, and that was increased by 71,000. There were some changes in athletic coaches, transportation, the Knowledge Bowl and supplies. Those in total, it was an increase of 13,000. And then all the other programs in the district combined, there was a change of about $5,000. Special ed purchase services, there was a high needs student in the district, and we purchased some services from 917. That student left. So Dave had contacted 917 to find out then what would our reduction be in those purchase services because of that, and it's 69,000, so the budget was adjusted by that. Tuition bills to 917, we look at those every year and try to adjust them, as close as we think that they're going to end up being. And then payroll adjustments across the board increased a total of 107,000. And as part of that, there was an increase of 5.5 FTEs. 3 of those FTEs were kindergarten because the enrollment actuals were more than what was anticipated. There was some increases to the middle school because of the 5th grade level, the increase in enrollment. The adopted budget had estimated amounts for new hires. Those have been updated to actual now that they've been hired. This budget, all contracts have been settled, so it's actual contract amounts. There's no estimates in salaries. And all the health and dental premiums have been updated. So with these changes, the total changes to expenditures net out to an increase of $10,000, which really isn't a big change with all the changes that were made. So So then the bottom up portion of this, what it shows is, if you look on the very right-hand side, it shows what our expected ending fund balances were projected to be in the adopted budget. So like the first one, for the restricted portion, the capital deferred maintenance, there was a net change in the expected ending fund balance of a positive 244,338. That goes back to the timing of these projects in the summer. And the restricted portion of the budget can only be spent on certain things. We don't have the availability to use that for normal operations. And then the committed for pension and technology, the revised budget is actually a decrease of the expected ending fund balance. And that's because we now had all of our retirees in and calculated what the payments for their severance will be. The part that we're most concerned about, or that we look at the most, is the unrestricted part, or the unassigned. And the change from the expected ending fund balance for the adopted to the revised was an increase of $668,326. And where that comes from is the $221,000 change from above for this, from the adopted to the revised. And then we ended the year 13-14 with a positive variance to our budget, and you would have gotten the detail on what those variances were. So if you add those together, that's where we're basically ahead of where we thought we would be at this point in time. So then if we go to the next page, and I'll just talk about the general fund really quick. The general fund consists of the three different parts: restricted, which it's limited on what we can spend those dollars on; the committed, which those are also restricted. So our main focus is always on the unassigned, which is the yellow bar across the bottom. So we started out the year with $12.4 million in that fund balance. Our expected revenues are $43.6 million. Our expected expenditures are $44.3 million. So we're expecting to have our expenditures exceed our revenue by $654,000, which would reduce then our ending fund balance to 11.8. And then the next page, it basically shows you the same thing for all the other funds, the food service, debt service, and all of those funds. Okay, if we go to page 5 and 6, if you kind of look at those together in your packet, again, you want to look at the yellow bar, the unassigned. That's what we're looking at. It shows you the revenues and expenditures for the unassigned fund balance. The next two pages show you the same thing for all the other funds. Then if you go to page 10, that will just show you the staffing and in what area that this budget is based on. And this is the teacher FTE staffing. The next page, it's the projected pupil units, what this budget is based on. So the top part of it is our general ed formula. So for 14-15, our formula is 5,831 per student. This is the year that you have to remember that how we count the students has changed and the weighting for the students have now changed. So you don't see any historical data now comparing it to last year's pupil units because it's not going to make sense anymore. And then the formula, if you look at the formula this year compared to last year, it looks like there was a huge jump. But there really was only a net jump of 1.5% because they had to adjust the formula to compensate for the weighting that they changed on the students. Okay, and then the other thing for the projection of the students, it shows you at the top, the 4,962, and then where there's a slight decrease. If you look at the bottom of that, it's giving you the formula. That's based on thinking that we would get 1.5% added to the formula every year. The second section here is declining enrollment. There's a new part of the formula out there now where we get 28% of the general ed formula for the number of students that we decline. So, like in 14-15, we had 37 less students than the prior year. So we're gonna get $1,633 times the 37 for aid on those students. And then the bottom is the referendum dollar amount and the students that are counted for that formula. And the reason the referendum dollar amount at the bottom increases is because we have the state inflation factor attached to our second referendum. And then if you get farther back in here, it just goes then into more detail, like detail of the pupil units, like per building, per grade level. It goes back into more detail on our capital budget, what the projects are. And then the very last 2 pages in here is our finals for 13-14. So that will be what I'll touch on for the budget portion of it. And so then now for the truth and taxation. We also have to discuss the budget as part of the truth and taxation, but it's kind of discussed in more of a overall summary rather than the detail of the revised budget. So okay, so this first year, or this first page just gives you kind of a summary of the timeline of the levy process. The levy that's going to be approved tonight is actually for next school year. The budget we have to discuss tonight as part of the truth and taxation is the current year's budget. So it kind of doesn't jive together, but that's what we have to do. So we actually start the budgeting process in May. We send information to the State Department. They get that put together. They send us the proposed budget in September. And the key with the proposed budget is your final, or the proposed levy is that your final levy cannot exceed the amount in the proposed levy. It can be less, but it cannot exceed that amount. Unless it's you have a referendum out there, and we don't have that this year. Okay, the factors that impact the tax levy is legislative decisions, if they change formulas in there, whether there is a vote out there for building bonds or referendums. And then there's also local factors. Now that market rates or assessed values are starting to go up, I had a couple of different calls of why, their property taxes are higher than what they thought they were going to be. If the assessed value of your house goes up, say 50%, but the average value of houses went up 10%, you're going to have a larger increase on your taxes than the average person is. So those are some of the things that actually affect what your taxes are. Okay, so part of the truth and taxation is we have to discuss what the prior levy was compared to this levy and what the amount of changes were. So this will show you in the 3 different areas. Last year's levy was $14,689,145. This year's levy is $14,832,328. So it increased by $143,183, or a 0.97% increase. What these changes were, the more detailed of it is, there's a equity revenue formula within this levy that increased by $204,715. There's 3 formulas that determine what this amount is going to be. But the key on this one, why it increased, was they did some changes in the legislature, and there was an unintended increase to everybody's levy on this equity revenue. At this point in time, we've heard nothing that they're going to change that in the future. So at this point, it's an additional $204,000, which we may or may not continue to have in future levies. Transition revenue, there was just a $20 decrease, and it was due to prior year adjustments. Reemployment is one where you have to guess what your reemployment costs are going to be. That amount is levied, and then in the next year, the levy is adjusted based on what the actual costs were. So our reemployment didn't increase by $28,000, but the prior year's levy was a negative adjustment based on prior years. So if you have a negative adjustment and then what your regular reemployment levy is, it makes it look like it's a larger amount. The referendum portion went up $12,903. Referendums are based on pupil units. So when we levy, we're trying to guess what our pupil units are 2 years from now. So that's what's levied in the current levy. And then the next year in that levy, then they input what your actual pupil units ended up being. And so you're always going to have prior year adjustments. Sometimes they're negative, sometimes they're positive, depending where you ended up in your projection. And then we also have the inflation factor in that one half of the levy. So the inflation factor would have increased the levy by $57,479. If you wouldn't have had that, you wouldn't have had that increase. And because our enrollment is going down, you would think that you would see this referendum amount going down, but that inflation factor is what keeps it more stable. Local optional, there was just a $742 decrease, and this is the portion, it's still part of the actual referendum. They subtract out part of the referendum and they call it locational optional. Career and technical is one that you levy estimated expenses and then the next year they adjust it to actual. Safe school levies is the same way. It's based on pupil count, so it's adjusted based on what your actual pupil count was. Student achievement, this happened not in this off-year legislation session, but the one prior to that. We're now part of the general ed formula. There is a levy component to it. And so that adjustment is based on also on the pupil unit from projected to actual. Operating capital, a few years back, we were seeing this amount go down because it's based on your market value. So as your market value goes up, it changes the formula, and you're going to pay more of your operating capital under levy than aid. Whereas a few years back, our market values were going down, so we were paying less through levy than we were getting in aid. So that's just based on the formula and our market values going up. Abatements are if somebody doesn't feel that the assessed value of their house is correct and they go to the county and have it changed. It's so that the school districts don't lose those tax dollars then. We've lost them because they changed the value of their home, but then we get them back through an abatement. The increase in health and safety has to do with the middle school fire alarm project. It's a fire marshal, you have to do it for safety. We try to keep the health and safety at, a zero change, but you can't always do that. Lease levy is another one that has to do with prior year adjustment. Our lease levies run about $426,000 a year right now. Prior years, we had all these lease levies for like all the community ed programs before they moved into Tilden. And because you're levying out in advance for those costs, then when the year's over, for the next levy, you have to levy what was the actual cost, and they make adjustments. Well, last year we had the final adjustment for that move from leasing for community ed for Tilden. So we had a negative adjustment, which makes it look like our costs went up this year, but they didn't. We shouldn't see any adjustments in here now from this point on for the lease levy. Deferred maintenance is just based on your building age, so when that's updated, it changes this levy. So for the general fund, the total change was an increase of $504,944. The community ed portion was an increase of $15,984, and that's the school age care disabled program and its prior year adjustments. And that should be caught up now, where we shouldn't be seeing any more increases in that area. And then the debt service, you just approved the refunding of bonds the last board meeting. And usually what happens is that happened right between the proposed levy and the final levy. And because it was a decrease to the levy, we could get that change done now instead of waiting until the next levy. So that reduces our debt service portion by $377,745. And you're not going to see that reduction in the change of the levy, but that is a reduction that is happening now every year. So the total change was the $143,183, or 0.97%. And then there's two areas of the levy, whether it's voter approved or whether it's the legislation district. So the voter approved portion was reduced by $355,371, and the other part of the levy was an increase, which is the net of $143. Okay, then this is the budget overview that we have to go through, and these same numbers are a lot of the numbers that you just saw in this revised budget. The only exception is Fund 45 is not included in here, which is the retiree health fund, or our self-funded insurance funds are not included in there. So that's our total expected revenues for 14-15 and our total expected expenditures. And then we have to, the whole purpose of the truth in taxation is of your total revenues, how much of it is being funded by levies. And that's what the whole purpose is. So of our total 78,612, 18.8% of it is being funded by levies. And the numbers do look a little skewed this year, and it has to do with this is the bond refunding. For 2 months, those dollars are sitting in our debt service account. And then 2 months from now, they call it a call, where they pull the bonds back out, and then they're gone. But so for those 2 months, it makes our revenues and expenditures look really high in the debt service, which then that skews your percent a little bit. And what do we expend our dollars on? And so what this will do is, and this what you have to keep in mind, this isn't just general fund or food service, this is all of our funds combined together. So salary and benefits for all of our funds combined together is 42.7 or 53.3%. And then it just shows you in each of these areas what those percents are. And again, the debt service portion is kind of skewed because of those refunding right now. And then this is just another way of looking at where the expenditures are is by program. How much is spent on administration, district support, the teaching portion, our sites and buildings. And again, in the sites and buildings, that's a little skewed because that's where the refunded bonds are sitting right now. And that's the end of the truth in taxation. If you have any questions.
You know, Kim, so way back 2 months ago, the board approved to move forward with the maximum levy certification.
Right.
And I said that we've always just done the maximum because we can always change it later. You know, we could go down, you can never go back up.
Right, and another reason that you do the maximum is like our board meeting was at the 19th of
Yes.
September?
Yeah.
Okay, the final proposed amount can be changed all the way up until September 30th. So if there's errors on our levy and we're trying to get them to clean them up, we've already approved the proposed levy before all those errors may be cleaned up. So that's part of the reason you say maximum also, is so that all the changes up until September 30th is the most that you can levy.
So my question then is, because we then went through with the refinancing of the bonds, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
And that 357,000, we were able then to deduct that, let's say?
Right, because you can decrease your levy. You can under levy the amount that was the maximum.
So the amount that the board is going to approve tonight, is it safe to say that it's less than the maximum of what we approved, or is it still now technically the maximum?
No, it's 350 some thousand of the proposed.
Okay,
And actually on that sheet that you guys have that everybody has to, or that Angie has to sign, does somebody have one by them really quick? It actually shows it right on here. So this was our proposed levy, was 15,197, 643. This is what we're certifying tonight, which is 14,000,008. If you subtract that difference, it's the 377
Okay.
for the bonds.
I just wanted to clarify that it is that drop from what we
Yeah.
originally said the maximum.
Yeah, kind of the key is all the other bonds that we refunded, the actual refunding happened after the levy. So this worked out good, the timing of when it was refunded, because then we had time between the proposed and between the final to get that reduction in. Otherwise, if we would have had to wait another year, and then it would have been like a double reduction, and then it kind of skews. So it did work that we were able to actually get it in.
Tim and Kimmy's point in that clarification is to, we don't get to spend the 350,000, it's taxpayer savings.
Right,
Right.
Yeah.
very good point.
And again, it goes right down to the bottom line. So again, thank you, Superintendent Collins, thank you, Kim, for heading that up, because that's, you can see it black and white here, that it goes right down to the bottom line, so.
Yep.
And eventually, I'll be doing an article for the paper and for our website. Kim pulled the information, I don't know it exactly at my fingertips, but I think over the last 4 years, you as a school board, I mean, we're seeing a 0.97% increase. I think the 3 previous years were deficit. I mean, I think we went backward 4%, backwards 2%. And of course, part of that is that the state took over more ownership of the operating levy. But for us as a school board, it's nice to be able to say that over the last 4 years, we have not increased the taxes on the local taxpayer significantly. And you'll get to see that article as well.
Okay, so this is the 5-year projections, and you guys also have had a copy of this. So what I'm gonna do on here is I'm just gonna go through the assumptions that were used for these projections. And then it'll go to Tim for whatever you wanna do after that. Okay, so I tried to lay your packet out where you kind of need to know this page is what was used for assumptions for the second page that you can see in your packet. Okay, so you know what the assumptions and what was used for the 14-15 budget, because that's what starts out your projections. So then for the next year budget, the 15-16 budget, I try to get that to as close as possible of what it really is, instead of putting it into that finance model and let that project it out. So the assumptions that I use for that is this budget would be based on all employees that were employed as of October 1st. I gotta get my glasses back on or I'm not gonna be able to read. October 14th, I guess. Okay, the next assumption that was used was I added, the teachers group is the only group that is not settled for the 15-16 school year. So I added 1% to the salary schedule, and that's not based on any proposal. I mean, I had to add something. And it's kind of based on historical data. So I added 1% and then moved everybody up a step. And so that came to a 2.92% increase. I added 50,000 for lane changes, and we keep track of the lane changes and what is our average lane changes, the average lane change. For coaches, advisors, department chairs, even though I know this isn't right, I just didn't add any increase to that at this point in time. The principals, administrators, supervisor contracts, they were updated based on the 15-16 settlement because they're already settled. All the other groups, your secretaries, custodians, food service, they were all moved up a step and updated the rates to what the 15-16 settlements were. And this averages to 3.16%. Okay, for elementary staff, I removed Jackie Cobia from teacher on special assignment and put her back into the elementary FTEs. And that's not saying that's what's going to happen, but that's because we're predicting that there'd be 306 kindergartners again next year. So I wanted to have the correct staffing in there at this point to counteract that. So if we don't get as many kindergartners as expected, the staff amount would have to also go down. So the total FTEs used for this projection is the 291.9048. There was a hire after October 1st, so that would not be in these projections. For health insurance, I used 6% increase across all the years for the projection. Dental insurance, I used 2% for this year, and then I do an alternate 0 to 0.2 for the projections out, because that's usually how we set our dental rates. 403B, let me see, I skipped. Work comp, I did not make a change. The probability is we will probably have another 100,000 decrease in 15-16 of our premiums. Our work comp costs claims are continually going down, and if we're able to hold them there, it is going to be a savings for us. But we kind of do and don't have control of that. You know, some of the injuries are repetitive long-term. We had a lot of those for a few years. We haven't had any of them now for a few years. What's going to happen in the future? But it's still good. What's in the budget, there's going to be a savings in the work comp that's not shown in this budget. Okay, 403Bs, I didn't go in and update everybody's 403Bs, so there's going to be changes there. Retirees, there's no estimate in here that there's going to be, it's based on 4 people retire a year. This budget has no estimate on retiree savings. Transportation contract is up for renewal. I just put 1.5% in there. It's kind of based on historical data. Utilities, I increased 2% for this year. I did nothing with tuition and purchase services. Property and liability, I increased 2%. Then also the liability study, because we don't have it completed yet for 14-15, whatever happens in that study is going to affect this year also on the budget. And then the students, the referendum is the actual amount. The general ed formula, that's actually wrong. I have 1.5% in there. I said actual. I didn't update that. Special ed, that remained constant across all these projections. 15-16 is the big year where the special ed formula, everything changes. They're just now starting workshops for districts on trying to pull those numbers together of what your special ed revenue will be. And then for the students projected, it shows you what the students are by grade level. And the key thing that was changed in this projection compared to the last projections were to project kindergarten students, you have a lot of choices. They have this, and it's the and Pro model that we use. Jim Sheehan, they did the demographic study for us. You've seen it. They have in there where it will take the births in your county by zip code that happened 10 years ago. And then it looks at, of that number, how many of them 5 years later were in kindergarten. So you can use either the high number, the average number, or the low number. And in the past, I was using the low number because that was kind of following what was happening with our kindergarten enrollment. Well, this year, our enrollment happened to be following the high county births. So for this projection, I used the high county births. But then I'll show you, I also did it with the low county to show you that whatever happens with our numbers is really going to change our budget or our projections. So those were the projections used for the 15-16, and then for all the years from that point forward, 16, 17, 18, 19. Teachers, I used 3.3%, and where that comes from is I took a 10-year average of all the past settlements, and it's 3.3%. Lane changes, 50,000, because that's kind of the average that happens. I didn't add anything to coaches and advisors. I know that that's not realistic, but it is a smaller portion of the budget that it's, the time to go in and try to change all that. For projections, it's really not, I guess, worth the time. Principals, 2%. The other bargaining groups, 3.2%. That also comes from historical average data. Health insurance, 6% across the board, the 0.2 for dental. I didn't change work comp, 403Bs, no estimate on retirees. Transportation, 1.5% every year. The utilities, tuition bills, purchase service, and property insurance, I put in 1% each year going out. The referendum, it's the state inflation, that the estimate at this point in time that they've given us. And that estimate can change. And 1.5% to the formula each year going out. And then enrollment projections, there's a page towards the back of this packet that shows the detail of the students that we're projecting. Okay, so then with those assumptions, what you're seeing, you're only seeing the general fund's unassigned expected ending fund balances and the expenses and revenues of the unassigned general fund. It's not any of the other funds. So with those assumptions that I just went over, that changed. Okay. So the first column here, the 14-15, this is the revised budget. You'll see the same numbers in here, the expected ending fund balance. The 15-16 was based on all those assumptions that I just gave you, and then going forward, we're all based on those assumptions. The student numbers that are used for the projections are right underneath. And then the fund balance policy, what that would be for the operating costs. So based on our projections, if you do nothing, and all of our projections are right on, which we know they're not going to be, they never are. I mean, you can project 20 different scenarios and you won't hit one of them. But so you're projecting that the 15-16 school year, the ending fund balance and the unassigned would be 10.6 million. You would have had expenditures exceeding revenue by 1.1 million. So that's kind of the starting point. So this is based on the high birth for kindergarten projection. So if you go to the bottom where it's highlighted green, that is doing all the assumptions are the same, but we're using the low birth for kindergarten. And that's basically just to show you the difference of how student numbers impact the budget. So if the reality would be that we ended up with the low number for kindergartners, our fund balance would be $186,000 less than the top one. And then, okay, so then there's, I guess, one more thing. Okay, so reducing 500,000, it shows it twice. So what it means is the first one, we reduced 500,000 in the 15-16 budget, but did nothing with any of the budgets following that. The second one is saying that every year we went in and reduced an additional 500,000. And then it shows if you would reduce 750,000, just the 1 year only 15-16, or if you would go in and reduce it every year 750,000. And then down at the bottom is some of the different scenarios, and that'll be what you get into, right?
Well, why don't you just talk about
The difference.
the little cheat sheet down below, and then I'll hop
Okay.
into it. But what, you created the little cheat sheet for
Okay.
board members mathematically to see.
Okay, so like for 15-16, we projected that they would add 1.5% to the formula. Well, you hear a lot of talk, and it does make sense that their goal is to try to get to 2%. Because they changed the way that we count our students and the weighting for the students, a 1% increase to the formula is giving us less dollars now than it did in the past. Does that make sense how I'm saying that? Because the weighting is less,
Multiple factors.
right, the weighting is less now per student. So if you give us 1.5% per student, the weighting is less, you're not really getting more money. So I kind of in my mind believe that maybe the first year that they will try to reach that goal of 2%. And it'd be better if it was higher, but, so say that they did, say that,
Does 2% get you to about the same amount of money, or it still doesn't close that gap, given the weighting change?
I think when they made that change, I think that was the number, and I think that's why I keep hearing the 2%. I think that's the number that they were using to close that gap of the change was 2%. That's
Okay.
what I think,
You
but,
guys are-
But they have, just to be clear, they have not enacted that yet.
no,
True, and it could be nothing.
True.
right,
We
and,
don't know that.
Right.
Until the legislature.
right. So in this budget, 15-16, I had projected it as they're gonna give us 1.5%. We don't even know they're gonna give us that yet. But what if they give us 2%? What would that do to the budget? So that's what it's saying. It would add 148,000 of revenue now to this budget if they gave us 2%. If they gave us 1% instead of 1.5%, it would reduce our budget by 148,000. The health insurance, okay. I use 6% increase every year. Well, what if it ends up being that it's going to be a 4% increase every year? And because health insurance is a big portion of our budget. So if for 15-16 it ends up being 4%, then that's a savings to our budget of 109,000. So these are things that could happen, but at this point in time, this is what we know. The retirees, there's nothing in this budget of retirees, but if one teacher retires, the average savings is $41,298.
And that's a teacher retiring, being replaced
Yes.
by another teacher, to be
Yes.
clear.
Right, that's the
Yeah,
cost.
That's not a teacher retiring and we're not replacing them.
Right, if you don't replace it, the amount could vary from
Sure.
70 to
Sure.
90,000,
Yeah.
okay. So if 4 teachers would retire, and I think Tim knows more than I do on some maybes, because a lot of it is not public yet. So say 4 would retire, which kind of might be a reasonable, then that's 165,000 that would reduce these numbers up here. Okay, then I talked about the teacher's salary schedule. Well, I put 1% on it. Well, what if it ends up being 1.5%? Then that's going to reduce your budget. It's going to cost you more by 105,000. say it goes the other way, and it's only, I put 1%, say it's only 0.5, that would then increase your budget by that same amount. So these are some of the scenarios. Projecting the revenue, say we're 200,000 off. Then it's gonna, your budget is gonna be 200,000 better. So, I mean, you could take all kinds of combination. I mean, is it gonna be 1.17 expenditures over revenue at the end of the 15-16 school year? No, we don't really know what it's gonna be, but that's kind of our starting point, if that makes sense.
It's the best information that we have right now.
Right.
I do have a question going back to the kindergarten, the high kindergarten, low kindergarten,
Yep.
average kindergarten. And I asked this of the others here too, did we ever get a final answer as to why kindergarten was significantly higher this year than we had originally predicted? I know we had some hypotheses as to why that might be, but did we ever, you know, I know we had talked about, hey, we're gonna reach out to these people and try to, or look at,
The Sheehan's, we were gonna reach out to Jim and his daughter and
Mainly what we found out was that it was not due to, we didn't have any higher percentage of people sending their children earlier or holdbacks, that pattern was the same. So it wasn't that my theory of a bubble year where these people held their children back because they knew it was gonna be all-day kindergarten this coming year, or that these people sent their children early. So Missy did a very good study of all the students on those birth dates, and we found out it was exactly the same percentage as we had in both of those years. Really what it came down to was students that were right here in Hastings and we didn't know they were here. That's what it came, and I think of the 13 additional students above and beyond in kindergarten, they were students of families that were already in Hastings, but parents just who never told us. So for example, you have a 10-year-old in our system, an 8-year-old in our system, and we never knew that you had a 4-year-old, and they never told us, and they signed up on August 21st. So we found out as we looked at most of it was students that we did not know were here. And so we've talked, you know, we've had some discussions with Mary O'Brien, Missy Thompson, what can we do better to reach out and get more accurate information.
Maybe we need to ask all the parents when they come to conferences, hey.
But don't you know that from
You know, they
preschool
do ask that,
screening?
it's on the.
Or they
it's
just
on
didn't
the
do that?
information sheet
Didn't even
you
do
get
that?
at the beginning of the year. You
So
just
you do
never-
ask.
Yeah, it's on the family data sheet that you fill out.
Yeah, so those
You just never
students
that
didn't get
part on the
screened.
sheet.
Can I ask a basic question? I
Yeah.
think it's basic. This number comes from the yellow line, and it's the difference between expenses. It's a number used throughout every chart. It's the expenses exceeding revenue for the 14-15 budget.
Yeah, if you go,
I know where it's from. It's the yellow
Oh.
line.
right,
Why doesn't the white line below it, that we reported in the truth in taxation, accurately reflect expenses over revenue? Because that difference is 1.2 million.
in the truth in taxation, we're not, I think this might be the answer, we don't have Fund 45 totals in there. No.
The
Here.
white, this, why isn't this on the total general fund? Why don't we pay attention to the deficit between the 51,617,642 and the 49,153,88
Because
instead of that one?
Because this is the total of your restricted, your committed, your unassigned, and the donations account.
Right, but in terms of, how can there be, so then the question becomes, how can there be a $7,000 difference in expenses? Or is it because some of the money is counted as expenses because it's in other funds? Is it an accounting
No,
function?
okay, so just say again, what are you trying to say?
Okay. On the total general fund, on the 14-15 budget, on the big page, you say to pay attention to the yellow. But in the total general fund,
Yep.
we list out $51,617,642 in expenses,
Yep.
which exceeds revenue in that line item by $2,400,000. And I understand how you could have some revenue that would be different in accounting, but how can you have, it's just a simple question, how can there be a $7,000 difference in expenses between total general fund expenses that we somehow don't have to keep track of in accounting for the,
Well, you are keeping track of, because if you go up here,
but we're not keeping track of it here. And that's why, I just want to know why.
because you can't take restricted dollars and spend it on our normal operating.
That fund balance is all of the unassigned,
Yes.
and the expenditures exceeding revenue is all unassigned. Is that
Right.
True?
For the 654,000.
For the
Yes.
654,000.
Right.
But in the total general fund,
Mhm.
we list out $51 million in, $51,617,000 in expenses.
Right, but,
So we're spending money that somehow,
No.
I don't understand.
Well, if
Well,
Or
if
is
you
it
go further up the
accounted for
table,
differently?
if you go further up the table,
No, yeah,
it's restricted and committed.
so that's,
And so
so
is
it's not money that's being spent, it just shows up as if it is money that's being spent, and it's in those other funds to $7 million?
It is.
It's a lot of money. Difference between the yellow line and the white line. It's a basic question.
You're talking these two lines right here.
No, well, maybe.
What page in the revised budget? are
No,
you
look
on?
at the,
Just-
look at
just
the
so I
main,
can-
look at page,
Six.
Is it page 3
no,
that we're looking at
no,
there?
the big, yeah,
Page 3.
it's, page 3.
Okay,
If you look at the bottom of that page,
yes.
And I think
that's
the
where the
difference is-
654,747 comes from. But if you look at the white line down below, we actually show expenses from the total general fund, and maybe it's just an
And then,
accounting
but if you go
artifice.
up the column,
Yeah.
there's the difference, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, is the
right,
sum of the two gray numbers.
right.
1.336 billion and the 5.956 million.
So they're adding, it's the restricted and the committed expenses.
The white line is adding all expenses in the general fund, whether they're restricted, committed, or unassigned.
So the 51,617, 642 that you're questioning, quick math, looks like it adds up to the unassigned of 44,325,021, go up.
Plus
to
the
go
restricted
up to
and the committed.
Of 1,336,346, go
So-
up a little further to the restricted of 5,956,275. If
No,
you-
I get that.
Right.
So that's almost $8 million
Restricted and committed.
in restricted and committed aren't actually expenses.
Oh, no,
They're,
they're expenditures.
They're
are they
expenditures,
annual expenditures?
they're expenses, but they're not in the unassigned. They're expenses in the restricted and expenses in the committed.
And,
Okay.
and
But-
looking at that, I would believe that they are annual because you've got things like deferred maintenance, health and safety, operating capital, lease levy capital, et cetera, down to pension and ASL,
So then my question became,
but they're not.
when we
they're
get
not
to the
within our
5-year,
purview here.
when we get to the 5-year projections, we don't care about them?
Well, we do, but not really for the projection, because we can't go in and cut restricted expenditures to balance our budget and use those.
Or committed?
Right, and
Okay.
use those dollars to not make reductions in our unassigned.
But
Our
as that
unassigned are,
as that disproportionately increases, so the proportion of the increase of that amount of money, the combination of the restricted expenses and the proportion of this increase is bigger than any other increase, to the tune of over $7 million. $7 million is in that pot. It's becoming a bigger piece of the pie. Doesn't that affect the rest of the budget a little bit?
no, because you can't take we budget in the restricted areas, you know, we make sure we follow the laws, we're not spending on anything that we can or can't, but it's like a self-supported, self-contained area.
Okay.
We can't take any of that to bring down and help our unassigned.
But I get your point. What you're saying, Vince, is it looks like we're only this much over budget here, but it looks like we're 2 million budget
Yeah,
over here.
right,
yeah.
But part of it is, like, if you go up into the first three major items under the expenditures, staff development revenues were 239,000 and we spent 515.
Okay.
And deferred maintenance, 286,000 in revenue, but 573. So even though we spent the 573,000 in this calendar year, it might have been some projects that we were
Right,
budgeting from other years. So it doesn't make it, so it's not like we're overspending in that budget every year by 250,000. We maybe did the track, we knew we were gonna do it. So in this year, it hit heavy.
Okay.
Same
And-
with staff development, we maybe saved some of the money more for reading literacy, and we're borrowing that money from the previous years. But yeah, otherwise
I
that'd
think where
be,
you were going was you weren't really trying to cut restricted to fill this
Right,
gap. It
I
was
was
more the
worried about it.
reverse.
I was worried that we were
Would need to
2.6
cut-
million over
would we need
budget.
to cut more than what we control to feed them the restricted
Yes.
revenue?
oh,
Yes.
no,
Yes.
no.
Okay.
And if that continued, if that were to somehow continue to increase disproportionately
Right.
compared to the rest of the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you would spend down, say, if you look at just your capital fund balance, if you would spend that down to zero, you would always then have to have a net revenue equals expenditure budget from that point forward. Otherwise, you would affect the general fund.
and I would have your
Okay.
same fear if
Okay.
we were overspending every year like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
What gets to
Yeah,
the,
so-
how big of a problem are we trying to solve?
Right.
Is
We-
it
Well, that's
2
what-
million or is it?
Well, that was the
Yeah.
point of Vince's
Right,
question.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we do look at those budgets, and we budget those budgets. It's just that that isn't what we're focused on.
We've come to believe you guys are fiscally conservative.
Okay. Well, you make me nervous
So once
sometimes when you
once
start.
can wipe out a spending
okay,
liberal like
I
me,
gotta
I'm
quit.
pretty happy.
Think this. Okay, so you want that other slide back up then?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No, those are great questions. You
So-
had me worried there for a minute. I was
So,
like, oh
so
my.
back to the kindergarten question.
Yeah,
What can we do now to have better confidence in that number?
yeah, we're
next
still
year?
working on that. We're still working on reach out.
Because I have a hard time swallowing going from low to high and thinking that that's gonna, you know, it's like, well, if low wasn't accurate, let's go high. And it's like, well,
The thing is with it, I think what happens in kindergarten, and we saw it this year, if you go off a philosophy of, okay, we're gonna staff for it, even if we would go to, let's say, 280 rather than we'd go from 306 to 286, that loss of revenue then should be offset by we should be able to cut a teacher then. So I look at that kindergarten, as those students roll in or out, you typically should be able to balance that. We struggled a little bit this year because our enrollments were coming in at all, you know, so we hired 3 kindergarten.
right, you can balance it from a staffing perspective, but like we've talked about before, going from 306 to 286, a loss of 20 students is a lot more than the
Right, so-
payment to a kindergarten teacher.
So I mean, I look at it, I keep that in the back of my mind when I look at this, but I also realize, yes, I'm losing revenue, but I'm also then able to reduce to some degree. So that's something that board members should keep in their mind as well. But I'm gonna walk you through some things now, as we look at how much should we reduce the budget by and have conversations on that. And technically, I went through with you on work sessions that in December, I wanted to know what that dollar amount was. And I definitely do tonight, but really, in January, as Dan knows, I always ask the board to approve a proposal directing the administration to reduce and/or make recommendations for
I'll vote for it
reduction.
this year.
Yeah. So technically, we probably can't officially say that until after we do that, but we can definitely have the discussion tonight and have a strong sense of what you as a board are feeling that you'd be comfortable with as far as reduction. So I want to walk through certain components with you. Another one ties, I want to slide in a couple things before I get into it. As you look at the very top where it says FB policy. So Kim, I don't know if you can highlight where it says,
This part?
yeah, so right there, FB policy. Later on, we're gonna be talking about our fund balance policy. And it'll be our second reading. And our fund balance policy used to be a set amount of $3.8 million. Our proposal that came out of two different committees said that just change the wording, instead of 3.8 million, have it 2 months operating expenditures. Well, you can see how then that is going to be a moving dollar amount depending on how you cut or reduce your budget. So I just want to remind you that as board members, that when we do get to that fund balance policy, that, because you can see up there, if your fund balance grows, then your fund balance policy says you shouldn't dip below 7.3 million. Then if it would continue to grow, you shouldn't dip below 7.5 million. So whenever you have it as not a fixed number, you're gonna have some, it's not gonna be a lot, but you're gonna have some fluidity in that. I wanna talk about, because this still comes back in my mind as I look at this as well. Scott and I and Julie and Kim, we were in the self-funded health insurance committee meeting today. We received really good news again for the third or fourth month in a row. When I say really good news, I say really, really good news. And if that continues to play out, I'm thinking, what will our health insurance costs do? Will they grow by 8 or 10% every year over these next 5 years? And if it stays where it's at, I know that it's not going to grow by 8 to 10%, which is great news. So that, I just want to let you know that that's in the back of my mind too, as I'm looking at these 5-year projections. And definitely, we all on the committee, and I know you as a board, want to, when you go self-funded, you want to build up a protection pot of money so that you have a rainy day savings there, so in case you do have some bad case scenarios. But that definitely has continued to play in my mind, is as if this good news keeps coming for the next 18 months to 2 years, that helps us not in the first 2 years, but definitely down the road in year 3, 4, and 5, because health insurance is a big driver of the budget as well. So I look at this and I see that we're going to be pretty close to 11.8 million in our savings account at the end of this current year, 5 months from now. And we've been spending it down over the last 3 years, and we definitely communicated with the community that we were going to get out of the red, add back staff, and then when rainy days came, we'd slowly spend it down. Well, you're gonna act on a policy later on tonight that says, yeah, we can slowly spend it down, but you can only spend it down to here, and then there's some red flags because we need cash flow. So that stays in the back of my mind. And if all of Kim's assumptions come true, we're gonna be over budget for next year by $1.17 million if all of those would come true, and we wouldn't have any retirements, and we wouldn't have some of the other things happening down below. But before we even get to that, and I know that some of you hate to do this, some of you who have been on interview committees with me, I don't want to talk about what we should reduce. I want to talk about how much would you as a board member, it's the same thing, but it's coming from the other angle. How much would you be willing to spend down the savings account by? Would you be willing to have it drop by 300,000, 500,000, 600,000, 700,000? So we've got 11.8 million sitting there. How much would you be willing to say, I can live with that dropping? Now it's the reverse of cutting, because in the end it impacts your cuts. But this is the angle I want you to look at it. So it's $11.8 million. 1 year from today, how much would you be willing to drop down? I'm gonna give you a sheet of paper to write that number. How
Oh
much?
my gosh, it's the Tim method.
It's the Tim method of interviews.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I didn't bring the pen.
You weren't such a fan when you used to do this.
Don't put your name on it.
I'm gonna put Andrew's name on mine.
It's
So
probably
what
gonna be better than my
dollar-
guess.
Oh, Kim,
I already gave you my answer.
Yeah, but you gave the political range, and I don't want the
All right.
political range, I
So
want
you're
a dollar
looking-
amount.
you're
Okay, how much
looking for-
are we willing to?
How much are you willing to have it go from, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars would you be willing it to drop from 11.8 million? Would you be okay if it drops by 300,000, 500,000, 600,000, 700,000? What dollar amount would you say that you, so if this is your own savings account, at the end of next year, instead of it being 11.8 million in there, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars would you say that I would allow that to decrease by?
So it's basically your expenditures over your exceeding revenues, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Would you be willing to deficit spend by 400,000, 500,000?
Do you want this to be like secret or?
Well, no, it's gonna be another little game.
But I used a pink pen, so.
Well, nobody knew you could. Now we know.
Oh, no.
So much for that.
I don't know who gave these. Usually that does matter to me of who put them down. But we're going to, at the end of this, if anybody can guess which one's Dan Cater's,
I think you'll be able.
I will buy them.
I think you'll be
top.
able to go.
Can I project, can I just like do a card next? I think I know.
Okay, yeah. 500,000. 700,000. 500,000. 500,000. 1,172,548.
That's a very specific number.
350,000 and 750,000, and I'm really shocked by these numbers, I'm gonna be quite honest. So we had 1, 2, I was hoping these would all be closer.
You're shocked high or shocked low?
I'm shocked that people,
Don't hire that number.
there's 3 that are 500,000, 2 that are 700,000, 1 that's 350,000, they'd let it reduce by, and 1 is 1,172,548. Now, does anybody want to bet me that I can guess which one of these is Dan Cater's? Okay, so,
Oh, yeah, I know exactly.
but does anybody want to bet me that I don't
He
know?
can pick it. I'm not
Can
betting. You'll lose
I
the bet.
defend my numbers?
No, no,
I know which one it is. You know, you can't.
Yeah.
He knows what-
okay.
We all do which one it was.
It's not a random number.
No, it's not.
Am I doing this wrong?
I am surprised, I would have guessed that you as a board probably would have said that you would have been willing to let it drop by 700 to 750,000. And the reason that I say that is when we went through our cuts last year and our reductions last year, we targeted cutting about 1.6 million because we're gonna allow our fund balance to drop by $850,000 to $900,000. So I knew that you wouldn't allow it that again, but I didn't think that you would go as deep as 500,000. Now, these are some of the things that, I know this is gonna be shocking to you. I've actually thought about, do we need to make any hard cuts at all? I know that's for me to say that, is extremely shocking. But,
That's not shocking considering the bottom of this page. In my 9 years on board, I've never seen a harder year to really think about what for sure next year is gonna be. So I could see us cutting very aggressively if we didn't have any fund balance, but because we do, I don't wanna cut aggressively and then end up adding to the fund balance. You know?
And it's a legislative year. The legislative year is the hardest year to project because you don't know what the funding's gonna be for the next 2 years. It also falls at the same time of the teacher's contract, which it is the biggest cost in the district. That's not settled, so you don't have those numbers, the actual numbers to put in the projection.
these are some of my thoughts when I looked at this. We're over budget by about 1.17 million if our assumptions come true. So I look at, okay, if we do have 5 teachers retire, and I do think that we will. I know of 3 right now. So the odds are that there'd be 2 more. I think 5 to me is a pretty safe bet. And Kim and I have pulled our numbers of, we don't have a lot that are eligible, but we have probably 12 to 19 that are eligible. But we've seen a lot of teachers not retiring right at age 56, 57. But I do know of 3 right now. So let's say we'd have 5. That comes to around $205,000 that I know that this will drop by. We know that our work comp, unless somebody runs somebody
Don't
else
even say it out
over.
loud.
knock
Well-
on wood.
Not even say it out loud.
But-
Because it's based on a 3-year average,
It's gonna
I can kind of safely say it's gonna be 100,000 drop next year minimum. We don't know what's gonna happen in the
The year
future. If you have a bad year, then your average is gonna start to climb. But for next year, you can pretty much predict that we'll probably get 100,000.
So I look at 5 retirees, work comp, our administration over the years have just had a tradition of not totally spending their budgets. I think this year, what was it, 300,000 or?
It's kind of been averaging 300,000, so if
But-
they don't spend it in 14, 15, then we're gonna have 300,000 again.
But I give it a low number. So I give it $100,000 that they're not going to spend their budget by. Then I look at, I call it a natural or a soft cut of 3 teachers. And I look at that, and there are some pockets in the elementary that if we wanted to live, and I know there's a 4th grade teacher here, but if we wanted to live with, let's say, 27 in 4th grade, 28 in 4th grade, you could make some cuts in the elementary. I also know that right now we have 289 kids in 4th grade. We have 366 in 5th grade. So I sit there and look, okay, 289 in 4th grade. We usually gain some students. Let's say we gain 11. We're up to 300 students next year in 5th grade, and this year we have 366 students in 5th grade. Should there be some squeezing there somewhere? So could we come up with and part of it is also we've got overloads for PE, so when you look at everything and combine that, could there be? I do think that there could be. So now we're up to 205, 305, 405, 505, $555,000. I keep in the back of my mind that it's not going to help us for the immediate year, but I'm thinking very optimistically about our health insurance over the next 3 to 5 years of not being what I thought it was going to be. Now, again, am I optimistically thinking? Yeah, I am, but I do think that that's what it's going to be, so I keep that in the back of my mind as well. And so I sit there and I think, okay, 555, away from that, I don't know, that we'd be somewhere around $700,000 over budget.
By the way, the last few years, the finance committee has recommended a 50-50 split. If that happened, we'd be over 50-50 already, of the difference between our deficit and taking from the fund balance. So I'm saying if you're projecting that we're gonna be out 1.4 million, that would, if
No,
the,
that's not the sum.
No, that's not the sum of
That's the
those.
remainder. The sum is 555.
oh,
Yeah,
So
no,
we're
no,
not-
yeah.
Oh, I see what you're
I see
saying.
what you're
You're saying-
saying.
yeah.
So we're
and I
not,
agree,
so we're
but
not
it's
quite
not
at
quite there.
50.
yeah, okay.
Just
We're
flip.
close.
But,
Alright, I'm getting,
yeah, we're in that same,
And I don't know, I can't remember, Bob Bernardi announced that he would be retiring. I don't even know if you projected that in here or not, but there's some other, did you project that in here? Don't you remember?
Bob's isn't in there, but
It's not a full
right
sentence,
now,
no.
well, it's kind of a soft because
Yeah.
we truly aren't going to know if that person is gonna be able to handle basically doing 2 jobs. I mean, if it works out, it will be a partial savings.
But there's a few other things like that transitionally, I know the cost isn't going to be as much as it is right now. So Kim knows that, as Bob retires, we always look at how we can transition and downsize a little bit, and we aren't gonna be able to, we're definitely not gonna be able to cut out his position. And part of it, he's been very willing to, he reduced his position down to 30 hours this year. So, all that said, I looked at this, and I slapped myself and looked in the mirror again and asked if this was really me saying this. But yet, somebody, and I'm guessing I know who that somebody is, somebody reduce it down by only 350,000, so that's still a long ways away from 700,000. So this is kind of like an active work session.
The 350 one was an outlier, and I know who did it. He misinterpreted the question. So the reverse of that.
It would be, oh, thank you.
And you, 300, even if that was true, I don't think we're that far away on the overall fund balance and where we're coming in. I accept some of those, at least. I'm glad that you didn't put a dollar amount on the health insurance, because I think in the near term, I don't think that's
No.
going to be a consideration at all.
Right.
I mean, the numbers are looking good, but
Yeah.
with run out and everything else that we have to take into account. So I really don't think I don't think the spread is that.
Well, this is why I wanted to not even call it cutting, I wanted to call it just right sizing. I mean, if we're gonna reduce teachers through retirements and natural soft things, and not replace them.
This one, I call it natural soft, but this would be, these are things that I think are going to happen without Tim Collins and Mike Johnson and Mark Zuzik and principals saying we need to do it. These, I think, could happen. They'll never happen unless Tim Collins says to administrators, hey, if we're losing some students here, we should be right-sizing. In the elementary, again, it's, the numbers are so close and a lot depends on who moves in, who moves out. But it almost says how much of a budget cutting process do you as a board really want if we're this close? Kim and I were actually, and we're both very conservative, as you know. I was right at about the 700,000. My number was 700, Kim's was 700. She wanted to do the range.
You cheated because you made your number equal what you knew what you were gonna put up there.
Oh, maybe I did do that, but no, actually, I thought the money's there. It is a year in which we're waiting for legislation. We all know that we're not gonna know the legislation until June or July. The teacher's contract definitely is a big portion of this as well, and it drives a lot of other contracts. Once we know that, which we should hopefully know by the next time, that gives us more accurate information on what to go on. But some of the assumptions, and Scott's alluded to some of them, what will the kindergarten come in at? I don't know.
That one just makes me nervous, just because it's such an outlier this year. It's like, well,
Yeah.
what happened?
Or is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
When you go back to your question about how much of a budget cutting process does the board want, does it require a board involvement on that fourth line item?
Yes, it
That
does.
says, we're not gonna go out and give dollar values to a site, but we're gonna say, we want the system scrubbed for right sizing purposes. I mean, is that a board action?
I still think
Assure
it,
that piece happens, 'cause
I think that's part of our resolution that we do in January. I mean, there's been times where I was
Is
told.
that sufficient?
I think it is. I mean, we're going to be directing you to look for areas of cutting and budget reduction.
I think,
I always objected to how harsh the language was.
No, I remember that.
I think that the process itself, you know, I've gone through with you as a board at several work sessions about how we would set the dollar amount here. I would then convey that to principals, which I would still do. Then we'd have committee meetings and open up to what those reductions should be in January with the public. We can, and with you know, the sites, but really, it would almost be getting down to it, and I don't wanna minimize 150,000, but I don't know how much of the process we'd wanna then, and we could talk about that as a board then, about how much of that process we wanna go through this year. Still, you as a board just aren't going to automatically accept Tim Collins, I know this, and you're doing your job, by Tim Collins just coming here and saying, I think we should cut this, this, and this, and you all say yes. I know that part of it won't still work, I don't know if I'm getting to the core of your question. Because I still then would go back to principals, and we would talk about some of these things about what that 150,000 might be.
Well, I think the core of my question, and I don't know if Dan's response is sufficient, where you say, okay, that sort of stock language that we take up every January, is that sufficient to initiate the process of
Oh, yes.
going back and saying, from your perspective, here's some pockets I want you to look at, and I also direct the administrators to, you know, go into pockets that you know are there? Or is that sufficient, and or do you need a dollar value? Would you prefer to see dollar value? Even if it is $150,000 to $200,000, would you prefer, is that necessary, or is?
I think
is
that
directive alone sufficient?
most years, I would prefer that, specifically like what we went through, I think
Yeah.
specifically what we went through last time, when it gets to that
Yeah,
heavy.
well,
But really, and again, I'm not downplaying $150,000, because it's still impacting somebody's life,
right.
and it's still gonna raise class sizes somewhere, and, you know, there might be some other areas that we can right size, so to speak. But for this year, I could live with it not having to be a set dollar amount, as long as I kind of know the parameters of what you're thinking, and that's what tonight's purpose is.
Mhm.
Now, if you were all going to come here tonight and say, no, we want you to get $1 million out of the budget, and we only wanna spend down our fund balance by 200,000, then I would need to know more of that specific dollar amount, because then that would get into a lot more depth and a lot more of a process.
I think one thing that, hopefully everybody sees this, but looking at the 14-15 budget to the 15-16, looking at the APU, so our pupil units, we're only going down projected, again, and I know this goes back to, we're going down by 5, and then the next year, you know, and we've been traditionally going down more. Well, next year it's only 5. The year after that, it goes back to 40-some. The year after that, it goes back to 40-some. The year after that, it's back to, well, the year
Well,
after
then
that,
if
we
you-
actually go up.
If you wait for that aberration
Right.
class, that fourth grade class to leave, then in theory it will go up by a chunk, because that's a weird
Right.
class, that's so
Right.
dramatically small group of kids.
Yeah, but right, when you look at that,
But,
when
you
you
know,
look at that
yeah.
APU, you know that spells a little bit more trouble for the following year.
Right, right, exactly. So, you know, I think you have to look beyond 15-16 and into 16-17 when you're looking at this, and kind of average, even if you accept, okay, you know, hypothetically accept that we're only going to go down by 5 students next year, or 4 students, whatever decimal place you want to take this out to. The next year, if you accept that, then I think you need to accept the following year's, you know, projection as well, and say, okay, we're gonna go down 40-some, you know, mid-40s, so average the two together, it's like 25. So it's like, on the one hand, if we just eat if we say we're not going to do anything, well, it doesn't look that bad next year. But then the year after that,
Yeah.
it could set you up for, oh, now we need to do a more dramatic cut.
And I do think that.
Potentially, you know what I mean?
And I do
So-
think that we will have to do a more dramatic cut that year.
But we'll also have a lot more information.
We'll have more information.
We'll have a teacher's contract in place, we'll have legislative action.
Yes.
And we'll have,
So let me ask the question this way. How many people would be comfortable with the fund balance being spent down by $700,000, going from 11.8 million to 11.1 million?
We
that's
just
the
want,
number I
like,
wrote down in the paper, so I'm
Yeah, and I wrote down a higher number, so.
So you'd be comfortable? You'd be comfortable? Lisa, you'd be comfortable? Scott?
Yeah, the number I wrote down, it's definitely within very close negotiating range, so.
You'd be comfortable?
Looking at the again, looking at the admin, you know, the admin give back, assuming that's only $100,000, when the last few years it's been $200,000 to $300,000, not saying that that will be this year as well.
Right. And I never.
You know, potentially that could be, you know, that could be bigger if we get more retirements, that could be bigger.
I am thinking 5 will be the max that we'll get. I am
You think so?
thinking that. Of course, last year I was wrong too, but I mean, Kim and I, from when Kim pulled the study of how many are eligible, there just are not that many retirement eligible. But like I said, I know of 3 as of right now today. And so, and I know others that are, there's 3 for sure that have contacted us and said, I'm looking to retire at the end of this year. So what I'll do is I'll tell administrators, I have a meeting tomorrow with board members, I'll talk to them about this. Still, I won't technically go out to all of our staff until the board makes the resolution in January. Then I have time to hit you with it, you know, one more time. But then I'll go out to, I'll do it all on the same day. Principals will go out to staff with what we're thinking. And then between then, I'll talk with you as a board. Do you still want it in January? Each of you go out to a site and say, we do have to make some soft cuts. Are there, I mean, we'll talk about whether we want to go through that process, because it's an ugly process. It's not pleasant. But it's not like what we had to go through the previous year. So that's what I'll do for right now, then I'll start gearing up with principals and administrators to try and get to around that amount. And did I ever think that I would say that in my lifetime? No. But I think when you look at all the factors and us having good, accurate information a year from now, and that's why we did build up the reserves, so that we could take some patience and time to do it. I just want to give you a quick overview of ties.
Before you're done.
Yep.
That was really good work, Kim and Tim, and some tough decisions and planning, and you were able to find out a lot of what we need to know and a lot of what we don't know. And I think we really appreciate both of your work
Thank
setting
you.
the table for that.
Thank you. I just want to, you may or may not have read about ties in the paper.
on the front page every day, 3 days, maybe.
Yeah.
Or got the email.
And I'll admit, when I read it, I was like, whoa. And I knew 50% of what was going on behind the scenes because we are a member school district. Over the last 3 months, I was getting some information. And would I say that some of it was blown out of proportion to a degree and worded? You know, there might have been a time, and I don't know, Tom Johnson will tell me tomorrow, there might have been a time where Tom Johnson carried a bag of money home after the Hastings football game too, because the article, you know, an employee took a bag of money home. They didn't tell the other part that the bag of money came back and every dollar was accounted for, but it left the perception that there was a lot of problems. And ties does have a lot of problems, but I just came back from the 2-day conference with ties. There are over 3,000 people at it, and definitely we had probably about 8 of our staff members there, 10 of our staff members there. And the purpose is right up here, is that it's amazing to me that this many years ago, there was wisdom that schools themselves weren't gonna be able to keep up with technology. That you were going to have to collaborate, you were gonna have to work with others, and it was one area where you couldn't have your own independence in a lot of ways. And so 48 Minnesota school districts came together. One of the levies that we do levy for ties, there's a building. And if you read the article, that was part of the scrutiny. They added on and renovated to this building. The building is located right by the State Fair area. They have a nice parking lot, that was in the article, because they rent out their.
Really nice parking.
They rent out their spaces. There was some auditing done. Ties themselves, as they got into this, asked for a very serious audit to be done. As they started, some of the board members started questioning, they said, let's go through a very intensive audit. Well, one of the things, and it's mind-boggling to me, they renovated a building at Ties for space to be used for our staff to come there, other staffs to come there. And there were change orders done to the tunes of thousands and thousands of dollars, and there was no record of it, there was no paper trail. And you know from the projects that we do here, that when there's a change order, Jim Huberty and Mike Brabender have sat in a meeting at this table, they either say yes or no to it, and sometimes change order comes from, they dug in the wall and they didn't know that there were 5 pipes in the way. Nobody could have projected that. Eventually, yeah, it gets to you and you as a board approve of it, and usually it's after the fact. None of this stuff was done at Ties, and is that a huge black eye? Yes, it is a huge black eye. So anyway, they come together, and you know, what are some of the things that Ties does for us? Well, this is part of their goals and their focus, so this is not only for us, but it's for all other school districts as well, is to do the research, is to do the analysis, is to drive innovation, is to provide collaborative leadership. So for example, Andy Leiser, we just hired him as a tech integration. Well, who do we mentor him with? We go to Ties, because Ties organizes and pulls together other tech integration people, and they have the meetings up there, and then they have dialogue on what they should be doing for tech integration. That's just one of the ways, but it's really to drive innovation and technology and in learning. These are just some of the things that we use them for. A lot of what I would call the Mark Moberg, and I know that you're on our ISD 200 email, and you'll hear a lot of times, Ties is down. Well, if Ties is down, in a lot of cases, we're down. But that's where a lot of our backup is, that's where some of our servers are, et cetera, and as we're starting to move more to clouds, and Dan knows more than this, and you know more than this than I do. Yeah, we're moving to clouds, but still a lot of the infrastructure is off-site there. And they definitely are who Mark Moberg will go to for, hey, how do I do this? What should we be doing here? These are all this is just a smidgen of what we're involved in through Ties. And I'm not going to go through it with you, but definitely from a student data system, Missy spends 20 days a year up at Ties, because it's the student data, it's school view, it's iPlan, it's IQ, it's our web. So definitely we have a high interconnectivity with our data. And then I think I just had one more of census, enrollment, MAR, scheduling, standardized testing. You know, we get all of that support from them. And you've heard from Mark Zuzik, we have frustration at times with Ties on how to schedule our middle school site. So we go to them, and it's a resource for us to say, hey, look, we have 5th grade, we have a 6-period day now, we're on a 3-day rotation. 5th grade is in a block, 6th grade is in a block, 7th and 8th grade have this. Help us schedule it all. They're the ones that come here with Missy, and they try to build a schedule for that. We wouldn't have that resource, and Mark, if he were here, would say, well, at times it's not a good resource for us, but we're a problem child for them, because they'll come to us in that situation and say, Tim, we can't do it. Come on, you're gonna have to pay a little bit more money, because Wayzata, Hopkins, Farmington don't have that type of schedule, and we shouldn't be just customizing this just for you. This is too complicated. So ties overall, we spend about $400,000 at ties. About $250,000 of that is just for equipment. We purchase equipment through them, we purchase computers through them. So when Melanie and Mark want to purchase a lot of our HP, we go through ties because they get a better purchase price than us. Really, to be members, it's about $38,000 to $40,000 a year to be members. Then the lease levy for their facilities of about $11,000. And I really believe that, yeah, it was definitely a black eye. They've got all the pieces in place now to correct that. I think what happened with ties was even though they were governed by a board, they didn't have a Kim Fry type of position that said, you need to run the way schools run. They saw themselves as a entrepreneurial business, and so they felt like they could run more like a self-employed business, and they didn't have the structures in place that we have to go through. And now a retired superintendent is now interning there, and so he's putting in, or helping to put in, all the processes, the checkpoints, etc. And I really don't blame the person who was running it like a business to a degree, because one of her difficulties was this. She needs programmers, and she's competing with Thomson Reuters. Well, Thomson Reuters can come in and outbid on a salary, so whether it was right or wrong, you could park here free for the state fair because you work for us. Well, in essence, that's losing some revenue then. Or you heard about the pub across the street that gave them, I don't know how many of you read the article very closely, gave them $10,000 worth of gift certificates. So she ran it like, okay, Vince, you've been doing a heck of a job for me. Thomson Reuters would give you these 4 gift certificates. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, you're sitting there thinking, I've never gotten a gift certificate.
I'm not gonna comment right now.
So anyway, I don't totally falter on everything on how she tried to run it, because she's trying to recruit and retain some of the top people in technology, and she's competing with Dakota County and Ramsey County and Hennepin County and that, and I don't think that she saw it as doing something under the table, so to speak. But it definitely, it left a black eye. We used to also get our finance side, our business side from ties. We don't anymore. We weren't happy with the product. When Kim came here, we transitioned into Smart Finance. We just felt that was a better product. We do have some concerns with ties on some of their products, but I can only tell you, as I've been out there talking to other districts, it's not that they're the only player in town, but they're still one of the best players in town on the student data side of it. Infinite Campus is one of their main competitors. Infinite Campus, I've talked to several school districts that have them. A couple of their products are better, but overall, to take Hastings and switch them Hastings totally off of ties right now, I don't think they have enough products in place. Now, I mean, in the back of my mind, have I always been watching and monitoring this? Yes, I have. Ties is worried right now because word on the street is that Anoka Hennepin is looking to pull out of ties. Well, Anoka Hennepin, I don't know if they're the largest school district in the state of Minnesota, or the second largest. They're right up there with Minneapolis. If they would pull, you can imagine the revenue loss that would be. I'm not looking so much on the cost side right now. I've always been looking on the product and service side. And I'm not saying that they've done a terrible job, but if I feel it can be done better elsewhere, we do look. But when Missy goes out and Melanie Haugen goes out and Mark Molberg goes out and I go out and talk to superintendents, I have not found anything better. Infinite Campus is very close. The unique side of that story is the person who owns Infinite Campus used to work for ties, left ties, and started Infinite Campus. So does he have a strong knowledge base on what schools want? Yeah, so overall, I'm satisfied with ties. It has been a black eye. I do think that there's gonna be a huge improvement of structures in place. I just wanted to let you know that, as a school board, and let you know how we are involved with them. We're heavily involved with them.
I did mention to a TIE's board member when I was up there for their annual meeting, that the last time the school board saw them was 9 years ago, when we were thinking about moving away from them. And they came down and.
Oh yeah, John Curry called me immediately because he heard I was thinking, well, that was when, when Kim came here and we went to Smart Finance. So they were worried that we were gonna bail ship, and since then, yeah, so like I said, it's, as you saw, they oversee a lot of school district sites. They've become a huge player. 3,000 people were at their conference on Monday and Tuesday, and that's from Wisconsin, Iowa, South. I mean, they are a big player in the school tech world. So with that, that's my superintendent's report.
Wow.
That might be the longest.
Oh, that's a record.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
So feeding off of that, do we have a motion to, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion to approve the 2014 payable 2015 levy for the amount of $14,832,327.85?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We have a motion to approve the revised budget for the 2014-2015 school year. And just so the public knows, that's all available on the website.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And a motion to approve the second reading of policy 714 fund balances. And I just wanted to double check on that one, that the amount in the first,
Was 3.8 million.
okay, because mine says something else.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, okay, nope, that's right.
No, I mean, we're going to 2-month operate, we're
Yep,
changing
Yep,
it.
that said that. and
Okay.
there was a, yeah, I had a different one.
Okay. But yeah, it's a small change in words.
It could have been a conversion when it went into Dropbox, but I think it reprinted the 400, because sometimes Dropbox converts a,
Okay.
changes lines around. Okay, so it's that one. Do we
But
have?
I just want to comment on it before you do make
Yep.
the motion and approve it, and that is that it is a small change in words. We're going from a set dollar amount, but we're going to 2-month operating expenditures, which is a big increase in the amount, but it's gone through committee, it's gone through finance,
Yeah,
it's
not-
gone through
not-
policy.
Yeah, not only committee and policy and everything else, but this was a direct recommendation from the auditors as well, that. deal
And that's
with
why I
other-
was supporting it,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
I think that,
This is,
I
this
think he was
is essentially the
surprised.
best practice.
Yes.
So I'm recommending the approval to go to 2-month operating. Okay,
And it should be 3.8.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
That's just,
that's
so
interesting.
my number was pretty small.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have anyone to make the motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? There's been a lot of discussion.
Yeah, I think that, going through finance and policy was good. Had a lot of good discussion. I think the only thing I wanted to add was that I believe this will be easier for people to understand, rather than why are you sitting on X point, X million, when you put it in terms of, hey, we're hanging on to 2 months of operating money, so that we don't have to take a loan to make payroll when our cash flow, isn't what it should be.
Yep.
I think it's a lot easier to understand.
Yep. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Motion to eliminate the position of computer technician 1, grade 8, and the corresponding position description. You had sent us an email.
Yeah, I just shared in the email that we have so many positions and we didn't eliminate it, but we don't have anybody in this position, we don't see it, so therefore as Kim goes to.
I didn't notice this before, but it should actually say classification of computer.
Read
We're eliminating the classification.
the classification,
As opposed to the position.
position,
Okay.
okay.
I'll make the motion with Kim's suggested language changes.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 3 resignations.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Any discussion on those? All those in favor? Any opposed? Resignations accepted. And then a few leaves.
Make that motion.
I'll sign it.
Any discussion on those? All those in favor? Any opposed? And Barbara Matz is looking to retire in April after 22 years.
And this ties back to an extended leave that we had given 2 years ago, and she's Johnny on the spot and getting it to us early, so thank her.
Yep. Better early than late.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the next dates, no lunch in December.
There'll be enough eating in
You stopped
December.
listing names because we were constantly screwing around with the names. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
No, I'll make the motion to close the meeting.
Oh, that's
because of
right.
Contract issue.
Yep, yep.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor? And then haven't we come up with a new way of doing that now where we?
Well, we'll come back and reopen.
Okay.
But we
Okay.
basically say that it was due to a personnel issue, and we can't talk about that publicly, but it'll only take about 10 to 15 minutes.
Don't wait. Unless you're.
All right, and why don't we just go next door, because I know that they've got to pack up, and so we'll go next door and chat.